Loaded and ready to go.
It's on the floor.
I don't have a glass, but I.
Anybody else like a tablet today?
Good.
Okay. Christine or Makita.
No. That's where it's ticket fees going.
I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It was like that last time.
It is, sorry. Right, Vice Chair, it is after 5:30 and you do have a forum.
Great, well, welcome. I now open the Lacey Commission on Equity meeting, May 30, 2024. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And so for the roll call, is that something you would handle about the roll call? What do we do on?
Typically, we just want to make an announcement of everybody who's here, and so maybe to have everybody in the room introduce themselves and then have everybody online introduce themselves.
Oh, great. So maybe we'll start with Dr. Jackson. Could you introduce, just go over the room and who's here?
Present in person are Commissioners Cliff Brown, Vice Chair Kim, Thelma Jackson, and on the screen joining us online is Christine Stolberg and Makita Hart, which gives us a quorum for today.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you. All right, let's start with land acknowledgement. I need a volunteer. Does anyone, Christine, Makita, would you like to read the land acknowledgement? Or should we find someone here?
Okay, I'll give it a try then.
Yeah.
We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian tribe and Squaxin Island tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who are absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and the city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you. Now I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items.
I so move.
I second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to approve these items. All in favor say aye. All opposed?
And Commissioner Stolberg and Commissioner Hart, can we get an affirmative from you as well?
Yes, sorry, I'm currently driving, so trying to multitask.
Makita.
Marquita?
Chair with Commissioner Stolberg.
Hello?
You do.
Okay. Okay, I think she said,
Commissioner Hart, was that a aye?
Well, she didn't say no, so.
You have 4 affirmatives.
okay, then items have been approved. Thank you. So public comments, do we have anyone in audience?
None.
Anyone signed up for?
Vice Chair, no one signed up for public comment.
Okay. Alrighty, inspirational item. I know he's not here. So maybe we'll just move it to the end of the meeting to see if he's here. So let's move on to business items. So maybe Shannon, would you like to? We have first is school resource officer program overview.
Absolutely. I'll start us off just to give a little bit of background. I know the chief's joining us here today. This group at our last discussion, when we met with the Lacey Youth Council and they brought up the school resource officers, you all asked for a little bit more information on what the program looked like. And the chief did send out some additional information on the program. And I invited him here today just to answer any more questions and provide some additional background. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me today. It's good to see everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, so thank you for the honor of speaking about our school resource officer program. I'm very proud of it and I'm proud of our school resource officers. And as you know, it is an all volunteer group that works in the schools. We have, when fully staffed, we have an officer assigned to each high school here in the North Thurston School District. Currently, we have 2 officers and we have a third vacancy due to staffing for this current school year, and we augment that with overtime. And currently we have Alicia Howard serving, and Officer Justin Beltran is currently on leave for family. Just had a little babies, which is fantastic. And like I said, we augment the third high school with overtime. And really, when we choose a school resource officer, first, like I said, it's a volunteer assignment, so we only want people in the schools that really want to work in the schools. And so the officers have a desire to work with children and help be a mentor to our students. And then what happens is they go through an application process where they draft a memorandum of interest detailing their qualifications and their experience. And then they have a interview with representative of the school district as well as the school they're going to be assigned to or they seek to be assigned to, as well as the command from the department and the sergeant supervising the unit. And everyone gets input into that, all the stakeholders get input into that assignment. Then there's a selection process. Usually there's several people applying and there's a selection made. And then that person is assigned to that school for a three-year commitment. And yeah, 3-year commitment. And so they serve at the school, and that school response is based at the high school and then also all the feeder schools that go into that school, so the middle schools and the elementary schools. And then there's some cross, when people are off, they go to different schools, things like that. That's all on the auspices of the community resource unit. And they really are there to provide mentoring and create a liaison and relationship between the students and the police department. Really learning how to not get students involved with the criminal justice system. That's really our whole goal. Is one, to create positive relationships, mentoring relationships, but also we don't want to introduce kids into the criminal justice system. In fact, what you see oftentimes when you don't have school resource officers and you have discipline or behavioral problems or other issues, a lot of times administrators automatically kind of default to calling the police. Right, and they want an arrest or they want some kind of detainment. And by having the students there early, they're able to do interventions and prevent things from getting to that heated moment, and really reduces the need for involvement in the criminal justice on a formal basis. Really work with kids with special needs, kids with behavioral issues, kids with really non-ideal circumstances, to help provide them with avenues and approaches and strategies to really get to better outcomes. So really proud of our folks. And what you've seen over the history of our school resource officer program is that bond and that relationship continues well after the student graduates. And we still routinely have students coming back in adulthood, making contact with their former school resource officers. And talking about, hey, thanks for what you did for me. This is what I've been able to do. This is my family. This is where we're at. And really shows the benefit and the longevity of that program. So we're very proud of it. It really feeds into a lot of what we do. Our school resource officers get an awful lot of training in this area. They attend a 24-hour training conference every year, either at a state or national level. They also attend all the training for crisis intervention team training, CIT, anti-bias training, anti-harassment training, And we have regular de-escalation training as part of all our training as Lacey police officers. And you should know that all of our training plans that we present specifically have a focus on ethics and ethical decision-making as a component of that training module. So we don't just train techniques, we train the appropriateness of that technique, when to apply it, when not to apply it, and better avenues for better outcomes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
How do you train? Sorry, how do you train? Is it like in a group setting as like really everybody, or is it kind of one-on-one?
It's a variety. So the conference training is done with those school resource officers, and that's usually done over the summer break. They attend either the state conference or the national conference. And that's generally at least 3 days, a 3-day conference of 24 hours of training with other school resource officers specific to school resource training. Other training is done online through the CJTC, which is the Criminal Justice Training Center for the state. Other training is done in person in a one-on-one setting or a group setting. That's what we do here at the department. We do that on every other Friday, depending on which group you're on. So all of our officers have access to at least 10 hours of training, dedicated training, every other Friday, or at least one Friday a month, I should say. That's in addition to the ongoing training we give them both in roll call settings and through memorandum and other items.
Are they like required to attend?
So most of the training they are required to attend. So training is optional, but there's a lot of training that they are definitely mandatory training. So the mandatory crisis intervention training team, that's mandated by the state. That's an online training block of at least 2 hours, sometimes 8 hours, depending on the year. De-escalation training, that's mandated. We do that all the time in that training. So anti-harassment and anti-bias training that's done through both CJTC and through WCIA. So we kind of get a double helping of that because we get both sides, both the law enforcement side and also through the city's insurance pool.
Couple questions. So we're talking to the students here, I asked them about the relationship or the difference between the school resource officer and the school staff members who are kind of involved talking to students and doing things. Like there was at least one incident at River Ridge where the staff member, Mr. Parker, was able to discover that this student had a gun and someone told him they had that kind of relationship where he was told and he was able to intervene and get, the resource officer involved. Do they work together, the resource officer with people like that in the schools? Is there some kind of intentional relationship that's forged?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the officers are not employees of the school district. They're employees of the city of Lacey. However, they work in collaboration with the school district employees. There's information sharing when appropriate. Obviously, there's some stuff that we can't talk about on a criminal side, they can't talk about on a student side. However, there's collaboration along that line. Information is shared when it comes to the safety of the students. But I should also say that since the officer's there on an everyday basis, it's not unusual to see an officer. So it's not that kind of moment. It's like, oh, it's Alicia. Oh, it's Justin. How you doing? Right? And they're involved in their lives. Hey, what's going? How's that class going for you? Hey, is that everything working out? If we figure out that a kid's going through a hard patch, we can kind of talk them through that hard patch and say, there's some strategies you can do. These are some groups you get involved with. Here's some resources. We can work with the family. We can work with Olympic Health Recovery Services, bring in our mobile outreach team and give them services that way. So it's really a hand-in-hand relationship working towards better outcome for the students.
Okay.
I have a question. On the training that you identified and some of the topical areas, do these officers have particular training on things like race relations, cultural competency, implicit bias?
All of our officers do.
All of them.
All of our officers receive that training. That's part of the anti-harassment and anti-bias training, implicit bias training.
And so in their training, it carries over into how to relate those things to young people.
Oh, certainly. Certainly. That's also part of the school resource officer training conference.
Okay. Because the students, and one of the students talked about a negative incident she had had with one of the resource officers when we asked the question, do you ever hear from any of your peers, anything they consider to be unfair treatment or, you know, disproportionate treatment of that kind of thing? And she related a personal kind of thing. So I was just wondering about those three particular areas that really come into play when they're on a daily basis interacting with the students. And when we look at North Thurston, there's now a minority school district, so much more diverse than the general population, so to speak. So that was one of the things we were curious about, you know, how much of those topical areas and areas of expertise do these officers bring to those school settings?
Well, as you know, Dr. Jackson, you know, we're one of the most diverse law enforcement agencies in Thurston County, in fact,
We know.
in the region. And that is, I think, indicative of our cultural sensitivity. And we work really hard on being culturally sensitive, so that we can relate to folks better. I mean, it really works towards, you know, our proven history of not using a lot of force, being able to successfully de-escalate situations. So one of the big things that school resource officers do, a little off topic, but I'm gonna go into it, is threat assessments. So as we all know, youth like to use online resources and social media. And sometimes when they're behind a keyboard, they say things perhaps that a little over the top, right? And so fortunately, because our officers are involved and they know the students, we're generally able to do a really good threat assessment on whether there's a viable threat from this individual. Does there need to be some type of administrative action immediately, or is this more of a counseling type situation? And, you know, frankly, I've had situations where fourth graders have made some just outlandish, you know, threats, frankly, what could be considered threats. And we're able to quickly, you know, diffuse those situations before they get out of hand. You know, and, you know, the public, oh, they hear a threat at the school. It's like, wait a minute. This is a kid who doesn't have the ability, doesn't really know what they're talking about. They're repeating something they heard, and they don't understand the repercussions of what actually is going on. And we're able to actually bring some common sense to that situation and not involve the kid in the criminal justice system. So I really think that's one of the big advantages of our program. I think there's a question.
Oh, Makita, you have a question?
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have two questions now. You had made mention of a fourth grader. Do you guys just have RSOs at the high school level, or is it at all levels of school?
So we have 3 high schools, and we have, when we're fully staffed, we have 1 school resource officer at each high school. And that's where they're
Okay.
primarily based.
All right, great. Yeah. So my last child attended Riverbridge, and so all of our kids have been at Riverbridge, so we've known at least 2 out of a few of the resource officers in the area. My kids have gotten to know. How much of a commitment is there a requirement for a resource officer when they decide to go into that to school? Are they required to commit to a certain term at a school as far as being able to foster those relationships within the student and staff?
Yes, we look for a 3-year commitment from the officer, so that they can, you know, they're there for an extended period of time. They're able to build those relationships and set the foundation. Obviously, you know, that's the problem. You know, kids see you one day and not the next. It's hard to get that rapport built. And we really want to make sure that, you know, part of community-based policing is that we're part of the community, part of the school community. So making sure we have that long-term commitment from the officer really builds towards that relationship.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
So I have a question regarding, you know, closing the communications loop. So the thing we heard from the students last year and more so than this year when we had the incidents at River Ridge and all, is that the incident happens, the students get up in arms, they protest, they do all these things. And the school and the school district said, we will investigate and we're taking care of it. And the students try to follow up, get additional information, it's like nothing's being shared. Nothing's being shared. They don't close the communication loop. So the students conclude that they're not doing anything, you know? So my question is, when an incident happens, a serious incident happens, will your officers do an investigation separate from the school district? Is there an investigation path your officers follow? The school's gonna do theirs. Do they come together to talk about their findings and what the next steps are, how it can be communicated, what could be communicated? Is there collaboration at that level?
So there's a lot of stuff to unpack in that question. Okay, so when an incident occurs, a significant incident, right? And there's that primary decision, are we gonna go administrative or we're gonna go through a criminal investigation? If there's an allegation, there's a victim, there's an allegation of criminal activity, obviously we're going to conduct a criminal investigation. There's not a lot that we can talk about in a criminal investigation, especially while it's ongoing. Especially where juveniles are involved, there's a lot of privacy involvement there. The administration investigation, as far as what the school is able to talk about, that's kind of another issue. There's also school privacy issues on that side of the house too. Where appropriate, we do collaborate, but we make sure that we don't contaminate the investigation, right? There's criminal information and there's administrative information, right? And there's a lot of places where they don't intertwine or they don't connect or intersect. So there's kind of a lot of different scenarios for that question. One of the situations you were talking about was where students were perceived that there was sexual battery occurring. You know, it's kind of the best way I could describe it, right? The sexual battery was occurring in the hallways. And the question was, you know, is it or isn't it, right? And then we received a more serious allegation that was investigated and frankly disproved. But there wasn't a whole lot that we can go into as far as just about how that was going on, right? Because there's two sides to it. There's actually more than that, but there was a lot that went into it. And because juveniles are involved, you really can't get into a lot of detail. So all we can say is the investigation has been conducted and it's been completed, right? And that's not a very satisfying answer, especially if you're 14 years old and you're 15 years old and you're like, wait a minute.
Right.
On TV, I get the whole thing, right? I watch Law and Order, I get everything, right? And so there's not what they're used to. And it's a very unsatisfying answer. It's, as an adult, it's an unsatisfying answer. You know, Dr. Jackson's called me on a couple of occasions going, hey, Chief, what do you hear about such, what's going on? I hear this is going on, you know, what's up? So, you know, there are things I can talk about. There's some things I can't talk about. The same thing with the school resource officers. Whenever possible, we work really hard to close the loop. Like whenever whenever there's a lockdown at a school or a lock, basically a stay in place order, because there's activity occurring either near the school or something like that. We make sure we always close the loop of what, hey, this happened, this is why this is what happened, and now everything's fine. Just free to go about your business. It's all good, right? We're really good about that, right? And when we do those communications, really make sure that we collaborate with the school district, so we're giving out the same message at the same time, so it's not, hit and miss. And that's one of the things the school district often comments to us is that we really appreciate that we coordinate our messaging so that parents and students aren't getting different messaging, right? So we were really hard on that. And I can't say that past years have always been that way, but this year has been really, really good. And that's kind of set the standard moving forward. On the issues of protests, I'm really big on the First Amendment, I gotta tell you. And whenever I hear somebody wants to do a protest, I try to reach out to them. I say, hey, help us help you facilitate this, right? We want you to do it in a safe manner. We want to make sure that no one gets hurt. We want to make sure that you get your message out. I mean, I've done so far as, hey, I'll get you Hunnemeyer Park. I'll get you a PA system. I'll make sure you guys got parking. I'll make sure, someone's there to hear you. And so you can do it safe. I've done that with some groups. I've done, at the issue at River Ridge. We made sure that, hey, what are you guys gonna do? What's your plan? Okay. All you guys gotta do is make sure that people can walk by on the sidewalk and then you're good. Please stay out of the street. We don't get hit by any cars. I think we dropped off some water to them too. I mean, it was just one of those things like, hey, you know what? Let's make sure it's done in a safe, responsible manner. Now, the school's got the school, right? They've got their concerns and everything else. I'm about, public safety, and that's kind of my thing. I don't go contrary to the school's wishes, but if kids are gonna walk off campus or do whatever, I wanna make sure it's done in as safe manner as possible, right? And doesn't cause other issues. So So I'm really about facilitating things as much as possible so that it doesn't blow up and turn in sideways and turn into something else. So we try to be really reasonable, use common sense when these type of things come up.
Okay, so we have another question from Commissioner Christine Storberg. Christine, go ahead.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So I hear a lot of, kind of positive things about the school resource officers and about the police in Lacey in general. And I agree with a lot of it, but I do wonder, like, if a student was to have some sort of negative interaction or some concern about something that a school resource officer is doing, did they have, or do they know what their recourse would be? Like, where would they bring a concern like that to? Would they bring it to their administration and just trust that they're going to get that resolved? Or do they, is like the school resource officer like the only point of contact that they're aware of as far as like police involvement in the school?
So much like any other school employee or counselor or teacher, if they had a negative interaction, they would go to their student counselor or to an administrator at the school saying, hey, I've got a conflict going on with this person at the school. This is what happened. These are the issues I'm having. We need to deal with it, right? So it's the same thing, right? So if a school resource officer is doing something inappropriate or just giving them a hard time and they don't think it's fair, they can always go to their counselor or their administrator and bring that concern forward. That I guarantee you the administrator is going to come to me and say, hey, I'm getting this feedback from the students. It looks like your employee is doing this, chief. This is how it's being perceived, right? Or, hey, there's an allegation of misconduct, and then I will conduct an investigation into that misconduct. It depends on what we're talking about. But I get a lot of feedback on my school resource officers. In past years, I've had a negative comment or two, and those have been looked into to figure out what was going on and what was happening. I don't want to paint a totally rosary picture in everything we do, but by and large, my experience is like yours. We get very positive feedback on our officers on their activities. But there is those avenues for if there is allegations of misconduct or inappropriate behavior or discourtesy or what have you. He looked at me funny or she looked at me funny or I don't like they're too big, they're too tall, whatever it is, right? There's always something. So, and that's okay. It's about creating that dialogue and have those conversations. And we all need feedback. I'm like, hey, when you say this way, this is how I take it. This is how I feel about when you say things like that. We need to have those conversations so we understand, okay, I didn't understand I was being perceived that way. That's not what I was trying to communicate to you. So let's have a conversation so we can communicate more effectively. So I think those interactions are really positive.
Yeah, I agree. I think having police presence in school, they're a figure of authority, for adults. And I think especially for kids. And so just fostering an environment where they feel comfortable to bring forward concerns is really important. And if there aren't a lot of concerns, that's great. If you never heard any concerns from any students about anything,
Oh, no, exactly.
that would be concerning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I said, in prior years, I've had wow, she's kind of strict when she talks to students, or he does, he's kind of overbearing sometimes, or this or that, and sometimes people need to learn their communication style, and they need to understand, we're really big, sometimes we're really wide, and we carry a lot of bulky stuff. And sometimes you got to figure out and get through some of those barriers to communication and to being able to get through to people and talk to folks. Because we really want to make sure that we're talking to people, not at them or down to them, right? We really work on building those communication and building those relationships so that kids feel comfortable coming forward saying, hey, you know what? This is going on over here, man. You got to do something about it. If we don't have that relationship, they may not be willing to come forward. And, a small thing becomes a big thing because no one said anything. And we want to make sure that folks are comfortable having those conversations and know that you know, if you do talk about something, it's not, you're narking on somebody, you're doing this. No, you're gonna help them get out of a bad situation. 'Cause a lot of times kids find themselves in bad situations and don't know what to do about it. And they feel pressured, or they feel peer pressure, or they feel they're being guided down a way that they don't want to go. And they're just looking for an out. And a lot of times our school resource officers provide that out and say, listen, there's a better path. And let's get you on a better route.
I have another question. Oh, Christine, you finished? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, yep, no, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. In the case of cyberbullying, which I can imagine is rather commonplace among kids these days, what's the role of the SROs in relation to the administration as it relates to cyberbullying, kids against other kids?
So there's a threshold, right? There's banter, just like, playground or schoolyard banter, right? But then there's online, if you go online and like I say, you go past that threshold, you start making threats, you start doing, certain things. There's that, you start hitting into criminality, then we launch an investigation, right? And say, hey, listen, this is criminal activity. And we have a victim who doesn't deserve to be victimized. We will conduct that investigation. And during the course of that investigation, generally we find out who's doing it, we figure out what's going on. And then we determine whether or not it's appropriate to go with just a counseling to resolve it, or do we need to go down the criminal justice route, right? We prefer to do a counseling and mediation and figure out what the crux of the issue is and get people on the better path versus, going down the criminal justice route. But if it's appropriate and there's a threat or a viable threat or something else nefarious, obviously that's the route we're gonna go.
So your SROs have the investigative capacity
Yes.
to investigate cyberbullying and inappropriate use of
Yes,
technological resources.
yes. I'm also, as a matter of fact, thanks for bringing it up. I'm currently in the process of hiring a digital forensic analyst.
Oh,
So currently my detectives are responsible for downloading electronic devices and conducting search warrants on cyber cases. And it takes up a lot of time, frankly.
mhm.
And that's not something, a lot of the data mining and the analysis isn't something that really requires a police officer. It can be done by a civilian analyst. So we're in the process of hiring a specialist just in this area. And I have my final 2 candidates I'll be interviewing probably next week. And that's kind of like, I'm pretty excited about that. And so are my detectives, because they'll free their time up. But that will also be available to my school resource officers, as with all my officers. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, I was thinking about that cyber bombing we got.
Mhm.
What's the capacity to trace something like that back to find out who that really was, or was it a bot, or, it takes a lot of skill for those forensic experts, to just trail back on a phone call or email or a text message or whatever. So good luck. I hope the person you hire, they'll come in handy. This is getting to be quite an area of involvement for some people.
Yes, indeed.
Pretty easy for young folks.
Oh, I know.
They have to brag on it. It didn't happen if they can't brag on it, so they tell them themselves.
I do tend to get a lot of
Share.
video of kids doing things, so yes. And it's like, hey, you feel like yourself doing this, man. It's like, so, yes, indeed.
So while we've got you here, you mentioned in your email about the accreditation process. Could you explain a little bit about what accreditation is and where we're at?
Thank you. So, accreditation is a process in which we're looked at by an objective third party, in this case, the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. And they have a very robust accreditation process that we go through every 4 years, and then each year we do an update. But the major accreditations every 4 years, and we just went through that accreditation process and got a clean on-site inspection. It's 145 standards that we have to adhere to, either meet or exceed. And those standards have to do with best practices for selection and hiring of personnel, training of personnel, operations, accountability mechanisms, equipment, operations and statistics and those things. So those 145 standards, we meet and exceeded all of them, which is fantastic. And actually I just got back from Spokane from receiving that accreditation award. So we just took a picture about it a couple hours ago. So from everybody that worked on that accreditation team, because it is a large effort. There's a lot of folks have to get the records, the training records together, the personnel records and all the things together. So I'm very proud of my team for doing that. And we are the only law enforcement agency in Thurston County who is accredited. We put a lot of effort into that, and that is part of our commitment to be professional and being looked at by a objective third party, making sure that, hey, just like you said, you can self-report, you're doing all the right things, right? But you need that outside third party that's applying that standard to you, like, yeah, okay, let's see where the rubber meets the road, right? So, and that's what that mechanism does. And so, and we have been accredited since 1995, and we maintain that accreditation. So we're very, very proud of that.
So no federal oversight, no judges and people?
I got nothing but oversight.
Did Seattle watch over your shoulder as you were going through the accreditation?
Yes, there's a lot going on.
There are a lot of
But-
messages.
But to bring up a great point, right? You know, so the US Constitution, US Supreme Court, US Court of Appeals, US District Court, Washington Supreme Court, Washington State Appeals, District Court, Super Court, the legislation, the Congress, we're accountable to all of them. They all have different standards or standards that apply to police officers. We comply with all those and we meet all those standards. So, you know, like you say, right, you can self-report, but we have a lot of eyes looking upon us, right? And so I think that's an important fact to note.
So this may be not totally related to school resource officer. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask. But since you mentioned about standard and accreditation and everything, some of the officers, I don't know, but some of the officers, skill de-escalating situation, they go for force rather than, I mean, it seems to be in some cases. Is there any trainings to
Well,
kind
it's-
of mitigate?
So I'd be happy to speak about that. So I'm glad you asked. So
Yeah.
the Lacey Police Department responds to over 40,000 incidents a year. 40,000. Of that 40,000, we use force 4D times. So 1 in every 10,000 incidents, we use some level of force. The level of force we tend to use is to prevent somebody from either attacking us or from fleeing from us, running away from us. It tends to be holding on to them or holding them on the ground, right? It's not punching, it's not kicking, it's not hitting with a stick. We used our taser, I think, once or twice this past year. I think we pointed a gun at somebody once. So we really use minimal force, right? It's not like you see on TV, right? The Lacey Police Department really works hard on de-escalation.
Thank you.
That's why, like, our model is to send multiple officers to an incident that, you know, obviously not just report call, but obviously there's someone involved in a crime or some activity. Because the more officers you have on scene, the less likely you're gonna have force. Or the need for force is greatly reduced, right? So instead of getting, you know, knock down, drag out, you know, 4-minute fight, you know, it's let's hold on to him, put him on the ground, let's give him a handcuff. Okay, we're done, right? We really work on de-escalating. My officers use a lot of time talking to people into handcuffs, right? So we wear body worn camera, right? Body worn video. And we have to store that video. I have hours and hours of video of my officers talking to someone, talking and 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 talking. My officers have the gift of gab. Words are free and they're full amount, for sure. And they're really good at de-escalating people and talking to folks. And a big part of the secret Lacey way of doing things is really talking to people to de-escalate and to not use force. Now, do we have to use force sometimes? Yeah, 40 times we had to use force, right? Where the officers had to defend themselves or they had to say, hey, no, you don't get to leave. No, you have to stay, right? You're being detained, you're under arrest. Yeah, that happens. But as far as no baton strikes, you know, nothing like, it's just, that's not what you're seeing in our levels of force. It's very minimal. So I'm very proud of our uses of force. and
Why
our
is
ability
that?
to
Why is
de-escalate.
that? Do you have a different training than other officer units that they are? I mean, we see, I don't know what we see on TV, they're like immediately take action.
That is a different, I'm not sure you're watching. So really what we're trying to train the state of Washington and through the Criminal Justice Training Commission is really working on de-escalation, using time and distance so you don't have to use force, not rushing into situations, not rushing people into handcuffs, right?
Is that a more recent approach or as?
Well,
old?
it's been the entire time I've been here. So we've been doing this since 2019. Now, before that, I can't speak to, I was working in California. But I can tell you, my entire time here, and definitely the Lacey way is really to spend time using the gift of time and distance, not to use force or use the minimal amount of force possible. That's really what you're seeing in Lacey, and that's what we hear again and again and again. So I'm not sure what you're seeing online or what you're being exposed to on television or different
Well,
places.
whatever everybody sees
Right.
it, I mean.
Right,
somebody
you know,
could go
but,
over this.
But I can also tell you that, you know, we spend a lot of time on de-escalation, both in training and practice, scenario-based training. We have a simulator that we have on officers that puts them through scenario-based training. Like I say, when we train people, there's always that ethical component, specifically in every training plan and every training cycle. You know, here's the technique, here's when and why to apply it, here's when not to apply it. We train our folks on how to deal people, you know, with special needs, autism, and other types of things, so that we're not using force inappropriately. The deaf community, the blind community, you know, people with different needs, right? So those are all things that we come across and we know how to do. You know, we have, you know, frankly, some special needs kids that, you know, are in the school system, right? And sometimes they have bad days. And we understand that. We really work hard to make sure that we get to the best outcome and not treat them like an adult, and also not use the amount of force we would use on an adult in that situation, right? We have something called the wrap, right? So the wrap is a 4-point restraint in a seated position with handles on the side, right? So if we have a violent offender that, you know, lashing out, trying to beat on people and all that, we can put them in 4-point restraints, right? And this way, you know, there's no positional asphyxia risk, and they can be treated by the doctors and everything, and by paramedics if need be for, you know, usually by the time we get to them, they've hurt themselves or something, so they have to be treated. And it's a safe way to move from point A to point B, and they're not injuring themselves or anybody else. So it's a very effective device. Now, not so much for kids, but talking more for adults. So, I mean, we use devices like that and training like that to really de-escalate and not use force. We have situations where I've had officers come upon armed individuals and they have talked them into being disarmed, where in other jurisdictions, they probably would have been shot and killed, right? That's the level of professionalism at this department. Now, I can't say that'll never happen, because someday I will come across an evil, violent person who is dead set on killing me or killing officers, and officers will have to respond. In fact, we had a situation like that up in Horizon Point, where they were trying to arrest a domestic violence suspect, and he tried to kill 2 of my officers, shot one of them in the vest, right? And we got into a gunfight with that guy, and that guy ended up killing himself, unfortunately, right? But he tried to kill 2 of my officers, and the officers returned fire. So does it happen? Sure it does. There are times officers are put in situations that did they want to go to that radio call? No, that was their job, right? We took an oath of office, we're gonna go protect people. And the law says you have to go arrest a domestic violence suspect if you know where they're at within so much time of the occurrence. That's what they were doing. They're doing what they were duty bound in the law. But if they had their drug, the entire time they were trying to get this guy into handcuffs, you know, was not to hurt him, it was to take him into custody. He chose to pull a weapon and try to kill the officers. That's one of the few situations where we've ever had to do anything in my time here, right? Generally, officers, you time and distance and talk to people, and you do everything they possibly can not to use force. I'm happy, I could talk hours on this. I know you don't have time for that. You have a big agenda, but I'm very proud of our officers and the little force that we don't use.
Thank you. I mean, that's really good to hear.
Sure.
Thank you.
But congratulations on your accreditation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really great to hear that we're the only.
Thurston County, yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Pretty cool.
It's good to know.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you, Chief.
excellent.
It's a
That's excellent.
very big accomplishment, and so
Yeah,
thank you, Chief, for coming tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
thank you.
always happy to come and talk and chat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you, Ray. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. You're gonna talk about, Ms. Shannon, you're gonna talk about draft DEIB strategic plan.
I will, and today we are going to go over our last two goal areas for the statuses and then all of the benchmarks that we've created. And then finally, take a first look at compiling all of the information and also designing it. Recognizing though that we are still working through some elements of it and hope to have another copy before you here shortly. So really quickly, let me share my screen. And we will get through the status updates first, and then we'll tackle the full plan that we have here tonight. So we're gonna take a look at the status for policies, programs, and services, and then livability. And then we'll take a look at the draft diversity, equity, and inclusion belonging strategic plan. And again, we are still missing some pieces. As an example, all of the appendices that you all already reviewed, we are going to put those in the plan. We just ran out of time in designing it, and so next copy will have them all, and then we'll talk about next steps. So as review from our last meeting, we talked about assigning statuses for each of our category goal areas, and specifically assigning either complete, which means that all strategies or benchmarks are practiced and completed. And then the next one down would be significant progress, which means that many or most are being developed or actively implemented and practiced. Having progress, which means that several strategies are developed, but not all of them. And then emerging, meaning that little or no work in that area has occurred. So we took a look at all of our program policy and service strategies and went through all of the benchmarks and reviewed those and assigned each one of them a status. So you can see, for example, and I won't go through all of them, but if there are particular ones that this body would like to go through, we certainly can. But looking at the first one, it says strategy under city policies is to integrate and reflect equity values in all policies and planning documents. And we have right now emerging. And if you go to where the benchmark is, it explains that there are some references to equity in certain plans, but that there are gaps in other plans. And so we don't think that this is yet to the stage of progress or significant progress, but that there has been some work with emerging. Very similarly with the next one down, city services provide services that are responsive, transparent, accountable, equitable, and welcoming, with an emphasis on providing safe, trusted environment for underserved community members. We put progress because we did list a number of items that the city has been working on. However, we think when we're looking at our benchmarks and what we want to be tracking, there's certainly still a lot of work to be done in all of these areas. So we can't say that significant progress or even completed. So just to kind of show and illustrate what the benchmarks are and the baselines and how we gauge these, again, just to kind of show, here I've got integrate and reflect equity values in all policies and planning documents. And in particular, for this example, we have implement the equity framework tool. And you can see for the baseline, we've established where we're at right now, where we don't have that. And that's something that we are going to be actively working on. Moving down to the one that I just specifically talked about with budgets and planning documents, what you see here listed is all of the budgets that have references to equity. So you can see the city council, city manager, human resources, and the police departments. And then it also talks about where there was budget funding increases for equity initiatives, where you find references to equity within the comprehensive plan and how we're updating the comprehensive plan here in 2024. And then also policy documents that include references to enhancing and expanding equity in the community. And then also we have examples of policy documents that currently we know of that don't have any references or specific sections on equity. So that was programs, policies, and services. I'll stop, and it looks like we have some
Could you go
questions.
back to that previous slide
Absolutely.
over here where you talk about the 2024 budget and it includes these things and you have those 4 bullets?
Yep.
Any particular reason why some other areas of the city aren't there, like public works or you have those four, it's specific to those four
Sure.
and the other areas.
Well, and I think, Commissioner Jackson, our goal right through this benchmark itself is to make sure that we get it integrated and infused, right, in all areas of our budget. And so we just did hey, here's where we're at right now, so we can
Okay.
continue those conversations moving forward.
Okay. I was just thinking of the employment scene where visibly public works people or who we see out on the streets driving city trucks, vehicles, and hopefully, you know, the whole reference to diversity, equity, and inclusion and those kinds of things. You know, city council, those were elected, city manager, that's one person. You know, human resources is critical, yes, and we just heard some good stuff about police, but things like public works, things like utilities, things like the visible things to the community that make people feel included or that they belong or they see people who look like them. So that's just a sample, but that's why I asked the question. There are other areas then that are working on some DEI inclusions in their budgets as well as time goes on.
That's the idea, right? We're saying, hey, here in 2024, like we want to paint the picture. So as we continue to progress with these strategies, we can report back to the commission, back to the city council, back to the city and say, here's where we've seen additions over time, right? Here's where we've seen some expansion and some integration moving forward. I do want to highlight, you know, human resources when you're talking
Right.
about jobs and
Right.
job descriptions. That's certainly big part of that is going to be the bailiwick of human resources.
Right. I was just thinking in terms of those visible things that the community sees and, you know.
Library, you know,
Library.
museum.
Yeah, those public kinds of visible evidences
Sure.
of diversity, equity, and inclusion, without having to look at a policy per se, but visibly. This is where change is taking place and you now see this, and this, and you didn't used to see that, and that before. So I just think that's another aspect of this whole thing that we need to try and keep in mind. How do we change the perception that the city of Lacey are these things we're striving for?
Mhm.
And if they never see anything, then the perception remains the same. So this is good, and that just hit me as you went to the next slide, and I just saw those four particular things.
And one comment, I do want to just remind the group too, with our first goal area, which was workforce and work environment, we do have the breakdown
Right.
of staff
Right.
demographics as well. So we are going to be tracking that information. And then just a point of clarification, really quickly, Commissioner Brown. So the library, that is our facility, but the library is actually its own district. And so that's the Timberland Library District. And so they have, you know, their equity efforts and their staffing efforts, et cetera.
Yeah, I just know she came here and gave us a presentation and talked through it and all, so to share what they're doing, their challenges, what they're doing well and those things, so.
Sure. Yep.
They're,
Oh. Makira, did you have your hands up? Somebody had a hand up and I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, I did have my hand up. I was just gonna say that I think starting with the HR is kind of would be the segue to getting some of those other areas implemented. So I think having them on there as a starter, it, you know, kind of leads into all those other surrounding areas too, because then you're looking at the things that you can put into place to kind of get more inclusion in the other areas of the city. So I think that's kind of where that would be. Maybe there's a different way of maybe reframing it to reflect that or to show that that's going there. I don't know if that made much sense at all, but my 2 cents.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, Commissioner Hart, and I think, you know, what we're trying to show with the baseline is just where we're at in this moment in time. And then to your point, in the future, as we continue to make improvements and enhancements in these baselines, we want to record those and have that as an annual report out on how we're doing. So you'll notice the reporting frequency for all of the items that are showing here are annual. So the idea would be that, you know, every year we'd have something come in probably, you know, the beginning of Q2 that recaps all of the stuff that occurred in the previous year.
Thank you.
And so I do want to just highlight that, what I'm showing up here is just a example. There are several pages of this in your
right,
packet, so you can go through all of that information. We did the very same thing for our final goal area, which is livability. And you can see, we have our strategies, and for all of our strategies, we've assigned a progress. We have our status, excuse me. And we've got 4 of them that have some progress, and then one we have as an emerging. And we have this one as emerging, not because we don't have partnerships, and I want to be clear with that. We have lots of really good partnerships in the community, but because it's very specific to advancing DEIB comprehensively in the community. And so we have great partners, but I think we can do a lot more work together within this area. So just again, kind of highlight how we got here. Very similarly, we've provided a baseline for all of these items. So you can see here with this strategy, it's supporting and enhancing community workforce education, training, and entrepreneurship opportunities that reduce wealth inequities, support underserved communities, and ensure living wages. And we talk over here about being part of the BIPOC business startup and what was continued in that program. We talk about the food truck plaza expansion, and this snippet cuts off, but there is a lot more information that was included as part of that as well. So any questions about livability? Any questions about the statuses too? Or feedback?
And
I think it's good as long as, we have a baseline, and if we're like checking in quarterly, to see if it's moving in the right direction or if it's stagnant, or then we can have the department to address what's going on there. There's absolutely no turnover, so there's no change, or, we've had, 3, new positions filled, and here's how we fill them, and diversity wasn't there were no diversity hires, whatever it is, we could see that. But if they're doing a really good job, we know that as well, so.
Yep, and that is, again, that's our idea with the reporting frequencies is I think quarterly is probably a little ambitious as far as like staff load and capacity, but annually. And then you can see that some of them are biannual, so every other year, but each one does have an assigned reporting frequency so that we can provide an update.
Yeah, what I would imagine, there's not a whole lot of turnover in many of the departments, one here, one there, it's not huge, but if there's significant turnover in an area, then the data point's gonna move. So.
But on the other hand, from a demographic perspective, as we continue to see this increased growth in the population, and as the agencies expand in their size and what they do, that's where the opportunities come up to include other kinds of people who aren't there. It's not about pushing anybody out to make room for somebody else. But the data we've been looking at with City of Lacey and Thurston County for the next 10 years is just up. And so it calls for more workers, for more tasks to be performed, and that's where the policies come in so importantly, to talk about how you're going to diversify, and they don't look the same. The size of the staff have increased from 15 to 45, but profile wise, nothing changed yet, so the opportunity is coming from the growth that is projected for Lacey and the surrounding area. That's where the employment ranks and all that kind of stuff get to diversify, but for people who think that all this diversity and inclusion stuff is about eliminating somebody to make room for somebody else. And we aren't in that position in Lacey and Thurston County, thank God. But we don't abandon the goal of diversifying the workforce. But there's a methodical process how that happens. People retire, people move, people whatever. So how do you plan that? How do you recruit differently? How do you write job descriptions differently, or whatever the case might be? But over the long run, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, here's what it looks like now versus here's what it looked like in 2024. And so all that's progress, you know? But if it looks the same, you know, to say, in 2030, whatever, 2035, we still have X percentage of whites, still only X percentage of people of color. But the department has grown by 45%, then we got a problem. And so the baseline is really what's gonna help us there, or somebody in the future, from an equity commission or city or HR, whatever. But that's where the growth and the opportunities are going to come. We don't have the restraints on us that a lot of other cities, where they're saying they want to be diverse and inclusion, but at the same time, they're cutting back the number of them. So how do you do that? How do you do that when your budget is dwindling, when you're, you know, so we're fortunate in that sense. We've got an environment that's allowing actual diversity and inclusion to happen. And all this is the plan to get there. And we're the envy of other equity entities,
Yes.
believe you me.
Absolutely.
People are jealous.
Like,
Right around here.
For sure.
Like,
And then to your point too, looking at wages, how are we looking at, you know, I know a lot of you have heard me talk about my son with a disability seeking employment outside of the county. Are we taking a look at, you know, our wages that we're offering comparable to other areas as well to draw folks down here or keep the people that we have living in our county to work?
Yeah,
That could be another disparage.
Yeah, I can answer that question. To go back though, first to Commissioner Jackson's point, I think again, that's why with our goal and our benchmarks, we want to capture where we're at right now. So we can take a look at this, you know, on an annual basis, but then also on a 5-year basis, you know, 10-year basis, and take a look at any changes and recognize any, you know, additions or, you know, different ways and approaches of doing our human resources from, you know, the starting of thinking about a position to creating an application, a job description, you know, all the way through the hiring process. Commissioner Hart, to get back to your question, our human resources does have a process for how they evaluate, you know, wages for positions. And it does take into account other jurisdictions outside of Thurston County, certainly. It's typically based on jurisdictions that have similar size populations as us, as well as very similar size general funds as us, and in addition to like positions. So they'll look at all 3 of those things when they're evaluating salary ranges for positions.
Yeah, they look at the MSA, what the payments, what the salaries are, what the cost of labor is for a specific metropolitan area. And then it's a matter of we're lumped with Tacoma, Seattle or not, you know, that determines, you know, the cost of labor.
Yeah.
Right.
And ours gets
Right.
more specific too than just the aggregate of the area, again, where they take a look at similar size jurisdictions with similar budgets and similar jobs to see, hey, are we in the same range, or do we need to take an evaluation on a position as well?
But then are they also taking the accountability that we're kind of transient community where we also have the military installation, so we are constantly getting people coming in and out, new families going in and out, and then our growth. I mean, we've grown tremendously in the 23 years that I've been here. I mean, I remember when the Hawks Prairie area was all trees and a little Safeway, and now, you know, we've got a whole mini city that's Hawks Prairie, and it's continuing to grow with the industrial area. So, you know, future growth. Is that being considered when it for that too?
You haven't been involved with that piece for years. There's a lot that goes into that determination. You know, retention is one thing. If you're not retaining people, you have to look at what you're paying them. You know, if you bring in a great employee, they're doing a great job, and then Tacoma hires them away. You know, all those things are taken into account, you know, when you look at, you know, labor cost, so there's a lot involved there.
And Commissioner Brown, you're spot on too of like, it's not something where it's one and done, right? It's done on a fairly frequent basis to update that of out of date.
Yeah, and if the city's gonna be a premium payer or not, premium payer, you pay for talent, really, you pay talent really well. And if you're not a premium payer, you lowball them and you don't get the best quality hire. So, it's a lot involved.
All right, well, any other questions on livability and the statuses specifically?
How many different goals did we have under livability? I see economic development there.
Yeah, let me go back. We had economic development, housing and homeless services,
Okay.
social services, partnerships, and environment.
Okay, I was trying to remember.
So one quick question, say, housing and homeless services. When the youth council was here, they were using another term. Was it houselessness?
It was
Yeah.
houselessness, yep.
Do we incorporate that or does that cover it? I mean, that was a new term for me.
You know, I
Had the unhoused,
We have a house
and
in
then
there.
homeless, and there was houseless.
I think throughout our document currently, we do reference it as homeless services. However, that could be certainly something that we update where we talk about houseless services.
Because they were making a distinction between people who are on the streets that folks see in tents and that kind of thing. But the houselessness was people who can't afford,
The couch, the sleeping.
couch surfing and that
sleeping in
kind of
cars.
thing. They aren't on
Oh.
the streets, they aren't in tents, they aren't
Mhm.
vagrants, out at night looking for somewhere to lay their head. But at the same time, they don't have a house, a permanent, more stable roof over their head. That's what they were calling houselessness.
Okay, now, okay.
To distinguish
Sure.
between homelessness.
Okay.
I think when we're looking at how our strategies are identified, I think again, we want to cast the broader net because we are looking to keep individuals housed and having, places to go to that are stable. So we can certainly look at updating that. That's a great point to highlight and bring up.
Yeah, and the young folks they identify with that, so
Yes.
so that way we will be including them. The younger people who may be in that situation.
So houseless is more like you have a couch to stay tonight, but you don't have a home. You don't have any kind of permanent settlement issue.
But you're not on the streets.
Yeah, but you're not on the street, like in a
Right.
tent or
Right,
on a bench, but you don't really have a place.
right.
I think in distinction though, it's a broader category to capture everyone. So it's not just as, the commissioner over here mentioned that it can be seen as a negative term to be called homeless because people associate it with only one type of situation where you're living on the streets. But really, when we're talking about people who are houseless, it could look like a variety of things, right? It could look like couch surfing with friends or family. It could look like living in a vehicle or an RV. It could look like,
Okay.
being a person, on the streets as well. But it's a broader category meant to distance itself from that connotation.
Okay.
And the other aspect of it, does the city have enough variety of living situations where more people can have a home, be it multifamily apartments, duplexes, or whatever? Is the zoning contributing to the houselessness? Where you can't afford a single family dwelling, but you might could afford an apartment, but there are only so many apartments when you're growing, so houselessness, it kind of gets back to some zoning policies too. They aren't homeless on the streets like we think of people pulling their belongings behind them in a grocery cart, looking for somewhere to pause for the night, but they don't have a house and then their situation is not stable. So the young folk brought that up and, I'm like Cliff, houselessness.
Yeah.
So as we move forward, and I know some movement is happening in the city and state law changed to talk about the units per acre, the units per lot, and, what you can build on a piece of property now versus in the past where only one single family dwelling per all of that's policy related that might help people change their living arrangement.
And we can take a look at all of our strategies, but to that point, in this category itself of housing and houseless services, we do have things that identify affordable housing. And if you recall, when Jennifer Adams was here and giving the
Right.
presentation on missing middle housing, affordable doesn't mean that it's only low income or
Right.
close to low income. It's affordable based on, you know, your own situations, right? So we do have some strategies specific to that identified in the plan as drafted.
Great. Thank you.
So that takes us to actually taking a look at the draft plan. And so what I thought we would just walk through today is kind of a quick scroll through all of the items and see if there's any comments or feedback for us as we prepare for moving forward. So actually, let me just set the stage a little bit with some more information. So you all received this draft in the agenda packet.
Mhm.
And what we have in it and how we got here, I think, is very important. So I want to take just a second to go back to this map that we painted a couple of years ago and just kind of walk through where we've been. So we started on number one, you can see with our community engagement sessions. And then we went to workshops for the strategic plan, including, you know, looking at the mission, the vision, the values, and then doing a deep dive into what became ultimately our 4 goal areas of workforce and work environment, community access and engagement, policies, programs, services, and livability. And then we reviewed draft indicators and benchmarks. And then we took all of that feedback from all of the areas that we crafted and we put it into a draft diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging strategic plan. Over the last couple of months, we have been reviewing over here in number 7, the plan with the executive team and also other staff, so we could get feedback and comments and their perspectives and additions for our baselines. And we have integrated the comments we've received, and over the last couple of months, we've been looking at that feedback in the baseline. So you're seeing the final product after everybody has reviewed it and provided some comments. And then we had engaged community on the draft strategic plan. And I do want to highlight, we haven't reached out or posted this yet, but we have been doing our community forums where we've been collecting and gathering information from community members on, you know, inequities that they see in the community, barriers that they're experiencing, and their comments are in this plan. At a high level, we've summarized it through some of the pages too, so it's being reflected in there. What we're gonna be doing here tonight is reviewing the draft, getting some more comments, and we want to bring it back at our next meeting, hopefully for a recommendation from this body to move forward to the full Lacey City Council. However, if more time is necessary, we can certainly explore that. But what we have scheduled right now, and this is tentative to where we're going after tonight, but is to bring the city council a recommended copy for review and discussion on July 9th. And then based on how that discussion goes, tentatively scheduled to bring forward for adoption to the city council on August 6th. So that'll be dependent though, again, on, you know, the conversations and the feedback that we hear from the council and if further diligence or work needs to be done on the draft as presented. So,
What question?
Yeah.
I'm always backing you.
nope, yeah.
The previous slide. Where's box number 3 or were the others just misnumbered?
No, yeah, it's a good question. So I folded box number 3 into 2 because it broke the 2 goals into 2 different boxes and I figured they were all workshops. So I just
Okay.
folded them in together and I didn't
Okay,
renumber
kinda
it.
thought that was the case, so so much in 2, but.
Yeah, and that's why I
Yeah,
stretched
where's
it out
number
to
3?
three.
What happened to box number 3?
Three is still there. It was just again, working through the different goal areas and had its own box as a distinction. So
Okay, so you might wanna say 2 and 3 or something.
I probably just want to
So-
renumber it. So
Whatever. Yeah, I just saw that. Okay, I'm sorry. You
Nope,
go
you're
on.
fine. Good question. So kind of going back to the workshops and all of the work that this body has done, I'm not gonna go over every single one of these, but these are each and every time that we have brought in elements of the draft plan to this body and we've worked, you know, together on crafting and creating what has been put into the draft diversity and equity and belonging strategic plan. So starting all the way back in August 23rd of 2021, we started the visioning process. We started working through crafting our mission, vision, values. And then we started thinking about what could be goals and strategies as part of the work plan. And we worked through statements of strategies for a long time that eventually culminated in our goal areas and our strategies, and then moved to creating our indicators. We then went through draft elements of what else needed to be included in the plan, doing, hey, we need to provide this background, this context, this information. We also reviewed all of the community feedback that we had heard to that point to make sure that what was in the plan and what we heard from the community is reflected within the plan. And we also took a look at several of the appendices, so talking about when we're putting together the benchmarks of our workforce environment, like where we're at right now in our workforce, what does that data look like? Where are we right now with our advisory boards? So all of that appendice information will make it into the draft strategic plan as well. Any questions on all of these?
On June 24th, we've got potential in red. But we're submitting the draft to the council on July 9th. So that would be the next step after there, huh?
If, as long as we have a recommendation from this body on June 24th, that would be the next step.
When we
Yep.
meet in June,
Yep.
okay.
And so the potential is just there in case, again, this body,
Okay.
wants to take more time and do some more diligence.
Okay.
All right, so now I'm gonna stop this share and we are gonna go take a look at what is in the plan and how it's all come together. So again, you all have this and can certainly go through it on your own as well. But what you can see is we've got our cover page for the plan. We've got our land acknowledgement. We have our just general acknowledgements of everybody involved in this process, including the Commission on Equity and our equity work group. We'll have a table of contents once everything is finalized. We didn't want to do this until we knew exactly where everything was going. And then we don't have the Lacey City Council message yet because as part of the discussion with them, we'd like to, hear about what they'd like to have included in their message. So this is something that is forthcoming. We have the Commission on Equity's message. So before you all leave here tonight, I know we've already reviewed and crafted this, but what I'd like to do is get your signatures so we can add your signatures down here where it says your Commission on Equity and your names as well. So don't let me forget, and for everybody who is virtual, we'll work on getting your signatures as well to include in the plan. We have background on the Commission on Equity. And again, this is everything that you all have been tasked with by the Lacey City Council, as well as everything you've worked on to date through the commission. We have the mission, vision, and values and goals. So right here, we've got our vision statement and our mission statement. We have our value statement and then the closer look at the values where it really breaks down the high level elements for what we're looking for in the community through this plan. We have the goal areas very broadly just explained. So somebody right off the bat could pick this up. That was one of the things we heard of, hey, it's buried here. Let's bring it up to the front.
Mhm,
And so we've put them up here on the front with
Great.
having our goal statements and then our sub areas and then what the city's roles are. We provided, the next step is a deeper dive into each one where it talks about the sub areas and the strategies. So you can see here, we've got our first goal area of workforce and it lists all of our sub areas and all of our strategies. Very same for community access and engagement. And the rest of our goal areas, so policy, programs and services, and then livability. Then goes on to provide a little bit more information on what is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It gives definitions of diversity, again, based on the OFM glossary, and then the examples that we all created together. So it was a little bit less technical, more plain talk. Provides the example of equity, provides the example of inclusion, the example of belongingness. And then it also provides the example of inequities. And so we added redlining as our example and provides some information that we've already reviewed on what was occurring in the 30s and how those impacts continue to this day. Talked specifically about racial restrictive covenants here in Thurston County and how people can now go through the auditor's office to remove any continued covenants that might be on the record.
Check your spelling on
I
covenant.
do want to point out this, I was about to say that. So what we're doing right now is, you know, we reviewed it, the designer, who's Donna Feliciano, and she's done a fantastic job. She's our communications specialist, has designed it. And now we've sent it off to somebody who's never seen it before, so they can edit and do all of that. 'Cause that is certainly misspelled, and we want to make sure that's spelled right.
In case it hadn't been caught, it just flashed by me real fast there, yeah.
Yep, nope, appreciate it. And then we've got an introduction just explaining, you know, what is in the plan in more detail. What are the elements that you'll find in the plan in another kind of visual manner that we just went over. So we've seen all of these before already, but now we're gonna take the deep dive into all of this information. It talks about,
Quick question. So this introduction,
Mhm.
is that that far over into the document before the introduction shows up?
yeah, and so I guess, you know, part of the introduction is pretty far down here because we wanted to make sure that we threw out first and foremost, hey, what are our mission, vision, values, and goals? So people had an understanding. If you picked up the document and only had 5 minutes, you've got those high parts. But now as we go through it, it's gonna go through a lot more detail. And so it's talking about what else is in the plan. We can certainly move that forward.
Yeah, introduction is, I would think would be upfront in this document, of which the mission, vision and all, would be a part of this introduction language. But that looks like it's about midway the document before the introduction shows up.
Yeah.
What is this document you're looking at? It is, the
Yeah.
purpose of this plan is to create a da-da-da-da. It includes vision, mission, da-da. So to me, that's too far over, just like the goals were buried, that needs to be upfront. After some of those credits and acknowledgements, I would think. So as people begin to flip the pages of the document,
Yep.
it
I mean,
sets the
it's-
stage.
This should give a kind of like what you are reading, what you're about to read, what this is about.
Yeah,
So
Or
to me,
have that beginning part be almost like a Cliff Notes separate thing, and then let this other one be. Because I totally get where you're saying you want people to be able to open if they only had a few minutes to kind of leaf through it. Then maybe that should be a whole separate pamphlet aside from the deep diver.
But
We
you
only
see
look
where
at the left side of this though.
introduction, where the last thing down there is, the plan includes a vision statement, mission statement, equity, vision, and 4 goal areas, so that's the introduction to this strategic plan and what they can look forward to finding in it as they begin to read, so.
We can move this forward. I think
Yeah.
that's an easy fix.
to me, that's
Mm.
like, you want to have this.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree with everything
Yeah.
that's being said here, and I think, we added and added and added, and
Mhm.
so it sounds like we'll move it up.
yeah.
Okay, great. And then we talk about transparency and accountability and how it's key to this plan. And part of that is doing our status reports and the status updates that we just talked about and having those report outs to the Commission on Equity, the council, and the community. Talks about what this plan is and what this plan is not, and specifically it breaks down the elements and what's our intention and then also what's not intended. Talks about the process, so going back and again, talking about our civic leaders forum or work group on equity and how it started, how the council then adopted the ordinance that set up the Commission on Equity and provides a little timeline of all of the activities to get to where we are today with and the eventual adoption by the Lacey City Council. That then goes into community engagement, and it talks about all of the community engagement efforts that the commission and the city have been engaged in, including the engagement sessions, the forums, the focus groups, the community events, the Lacey Cares survey, and then also partner events. So partner events, just giving an example, the Thurston County League of Women Voters Panel. And then it provides a overview of what we heard. So like I mentioned, it provides a high level of all of the comments that we heard throughout our engagement sessions. And then it also provides specific example quotes that we heard from places. Most of these came from the survey because they were verbatim when they were taken through the survey. And so we do that for all of the questions that we've typically asked in our engagement. So you can see that the first one, again, is about creating a welcoming community. The next one is about racism and equity. The next one is about participation. And then the final one is about barriers. We also then go into the much more detailed dive into the goals and strategies. So just to recap for the readers what those are, we provided the goal statement, sub-area, and the city roles. We provide a little bit more information on what those roles are and how we define those roles. So again, the roles being lead, partner, and advocate. And then we have our key terms. And so these were the ones, the terms that were identified from the Office of Financial Management Equity Glossary. And so we've included that in here. We'll also include the full glossary as part of appendix too. So if individuals want to look up more terms identified there. We've also added our additional key terms that were outside of the OFM glossary. Specifically, we added BIPOC, people of color, restorative justice, and then accountability. We then have our section on Lacey demographics. So the table of data that you all reviewed. In addition to that, we break down into some tables on population, on race, on ethnicity, on age, on household income, other key housing data points, poverty rate, education, languages spoken at home, individuals with disabilities, veteran status, place of birth, employer firms. And that provides a really good overview and snapshot of Lacey as a community right now. Getting into the deep dive into goals, sub areas, and strategies, we again provide just a, hey, here's what we are looking at for our goals. Here's that status report again and how to use this key. And then provide an example of how to read this. So where you find the goal, where you find the sub area, where you find the strategy, where you find the status, where you find the benchmark, and then where you find the baseline. And so for every single baseline that we created for every strategy, we have an entry in here now, so people can go through and read it. So you can see, I'll scroll through here pretty briefly, but please feel free to stop me if there's anything you want to see specifically. But you have workforce and work environments. You've got a high level overview of where the total status is for each of the sub areas. And it goes into the key terms specific to the sub area and provides some of the additional information that we talked about on cultural competence. And then it provides the breakdown of all of the strategies and all of the benchmarks that are identified. So all of this information is in here and available for community members to understand kind of where we are right now for each of our strategies. And you can see we have a couple of highlighted areas, and that's just so we can finalize it and know that, hey, we need to provide the right reference in those spots. So we've done this for all of our workforce and work environment. We've also done this for all of our community access and engagement. So this is all available. We've done this for programs, policies, and services. Public safety as part of our programs, policies, and services. For livability, our final goal area. So all of the information that we've worked on over the last 2 years outside of our appendices are working their way to being included within the plan.
This is like, wow, incredible.
I am blown away.
Yeah.
My goodness, it's a lot of work.
I know we haven't done hardly anything at all, right?
Are we
Kudos,
planning to
everybody.
print them in booklet format, or is it gonna be electronic?
Both. The idea would be we'll have some available in print and then we'll have it readily available once approved online as well.
May I request that when we look at this draft on June 26th. If we had a copy, a
Sure.
printed copy of that draft, so that, you know, we can work from that other than trying to absorb this fast-running PowerPoint. That do,
Yeah, no, we can absolutely have a printed copy. And again, you know, we'll pick this conversation up at our next meeting. So
great.
you have 4 weeks to go through and dive and find
Right,
things and we
right.
can have another conversation on it. So I think, you know, as far as our next steps go, so as you've seen, we've got some editing that still needs to be done. We have some pieces that need to be wrapped up and we want to have one more conversation, at least one more conversation with the Commission on Equity before we have a recommendation from this body.
Great. I think it would help us solidify our recommendation if we are physically flipping those pages and, you know, one last look at how things are aligned and that kind of thing. But that's awesome, Shannon. You and your staff have done. I mean, our counterparts in these other places, they. Thelma, what are you all doing out there in Lacey? Slow down, let the rest of us catch up. No. You all just have to run faster, that's all. But this is awesome. I'm proud,
Oh, yeah.
proud of us.
And I appreciate the compliment, but I also recognize you all have done so much of this work. We, again, through the last 2.5 years, we've been working on this together.
It's been a team effort.
Yeah,
Been a
absolutely.
lot.
Yeah, I had hair when we started.
They were black too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, commissioners, if there's nothing else, that is all I have for that particular item.
All right, we got equity index map introduction.
All right, so the last business item that I have for you all this evening is just to provide an introduction to equity index maps. And this is something that we have identified on our work plan to start having some conversations on. Just at a very high level, we think that creating an equity index map, and we'll get into what that looks like, is going to be around $25,000 to $45,000 for startup costs. And then our annual cost, it's dependent on if we want to do updates annually, we want to do them biannually, or at some other interval. Prior review, we talked about equity tools and equity lenses back in July, and so I want to show you how this connects. This is a pretty important part when we're talking about making data-informed decisions. And it's part of the work plan to start in Q3, researching and review of equity maps. So like I mentioned, we had this conversation on July 24th where we talked about equity tools and equity lens. And for equity tools, we had it defined as decision-making models used to integrate equitable considerations into new proposals, policies, processes, procedures, and practices. And the idea is to try to systematically examine how different community groups could be impacted by a proposed action or decision. And so what equity tools like to do is consider the impacts of social identities, groups, or categories. There is a big emphasis on backing up potential impacts with data, and then also encouraging community input and involvement. And so on the emphasis on data, one of the things in researching equity tools that we kept finding were people were referencing how they evaluated and analyzed it. Often they used a equity index map as a tool. And so we started to take a look at what that looked like. And what we found is that several jurisdictions in Washington state currently use equity index maps. So what's included in your agenda packet tonight is a staff report that provides a high-level overview of equity index maps, and then also all of the examples that we're about to go through. And the purpose of tonight is not necessarily to spend a lot of time looking at everybody's maps, but you have them available to you, so you can take a glance through them for our next conversation. So just looking here in Washington state, we've got a few that have equity maps, and this isn't every city too that has them, but a highlight of them. But you can see the city of Tacoma has an equity map, index map. And just to orient them really quickly here on this map, what you can see is that every census block has been evaluated using all of the information they have determined as part of their community indicators into an equity index where it ranks them as very high, meaning that they score up in the upper 80th percentile in most cases on whatever equity totality, how they have done the formula. and then to very low, which means that they would score likely in the lowest 20th percentile. For Tacoma, you can see the categories that they've selected are, this is just your general overview, but within this equity overview, all of these categories are considered. So livability, accessibility, economy, education, and environmental health. And if you go to the city of Tacoma, which again, you all have the links to do this, it's interactive. So you can toggle through and get more information. So for example, if I were to select economy, this map would change and it would pull up the indicators specific to economy and show again that equity index for Tacoma on economy. What this is showing just as a general overview for this one is the total population, individuals with disabilities, the breakdown of race and ethnicity, individuals who were foreign born, and those with limited English population. You could also select a specific census block and learn all of this information specific to that census block. And then there's also other tools over here on this side, just to give you some more information where you could draw and you could select a couple of census blocks and get the aggregate data for those census blocks that were being created. So this is the city of Tacoma. Very similarly, we have Pierce County. You can see the color scheme is a little bit different, but they also have the same categories that were identified in the city of Tacoma. They have very similar indicators within these categories, but there are some differences, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We've got the Port of Seattle, and it's showing all of King County here as well, but this is a map specific to the Port of Seattle. And it provides some other categories based on some King County fund categories here. But the premise is the same. You can see though that they have only 4 categories of economy, livability, accessibility, and environment. But a lot of same information is presented here. You've got the city of Lakewood, also has a very similar map. You can see the overview of equity, accessibility, livability, education, economy, and environment. Moving outside of the state of Washington and taking a look at some other areas, just as an example, and again, you can get into the deep dive and toggle through all the data. We've got the city of San Antonio, Texas, which provides their information just a little bit differently. You can see that they have different categories up over here, and they talk about a scored category for their equity matrix. And so you could also toggle through all of these census blocks and get more information, and this would update dependent on which indicator you select. Got the city of Portland, Oregon, works similar. And then city of Alexandria, Virginia. And then the city of Tucson, Arizona. So my point of showing all of this tonight is number one, just so you can start to see what is out there and look at them. What we know about the indicators through our research is that indicators vary between index maps. Not every one is the same. However, there are some advantages to modeling your equity map very similar to other existing equity maps, particularly if you're trying to look at comparisons, or maybe there's a program that you're interested in another jurisdiction and it's doing great things, to have those kind of comparables so you can see potentially what could be impacts to another community. As far as the indicators go, sometimes I think it's preferences determined by the jurisdictions of what they might be interested in including as a indicator, but then also sometimes it's based on data availability. So some of the things that are brought in might not be available in every community. And I'll use the example of, let's go tree canopy. So the percentage of trees that you have, throughout your city, and that's important because it helps map where there could be heat islands. Well, not every jurisdiction might have information on the percentage of their tree canopy, or they might do their own studies and are different from other studies on tree canopies. So data availability is certainly one of the things to consider.
So that was my question. So this is what's the source of the data? Is it census?
Some of it is, and some of it is also local data. So that gets to our next slides here, where what I've done is and this is in the packet too, I've presented Pierce County's indicators and then Tacoma's indicators. And what I want to stress about the indicators is that there are other data groups that are used, but they're not necessarily used to determine the index for these categories. And so, for example, race and ethnicity, you're not going to find race and ethnicity, but that is something that when you toggle on your equity map, you will be able to see per each of the census blocks or as an aggregate whole, what the race and ethnicity breakdown is for those particular areas. So the purpose of showing the two comparisons side by side is to show that a lot of it is the same, but not all of it is the same. So if you look at accessibility, for example, you can see that both jurisdictions use average pavement condition, healthy food availability, household vehicle access, households with internet access, park and open space, which is a composite of neighborhood parks, community parks, and regional parks, transit access score, voter participation, and then you see some differences. So when you're looking at Pierce County, they have library access and then total retail employees that they decided to include as part of their indicators. Whereas Tacoma, you see their indicators only include sidewalks and bikeways. So they've tailored them to them, but they have a lot of overlap in coverage between this area.
Tacoma is included in Pierce County data, right?
So if we go back to our map, and it's a good question here, Commissioner. So we have our Tacoma map and then we have our Pierce County map. So you have the same data from Pierce County, but the difference is that the Tacoma map is going to have slightly different data based on those indices. But yes, it includes those census blocks. So for economy, you can see that again, there's a lot of similarities, but there is some differences. So you've got both of them using 200% of the poverty jobs, index and median households, and then income. And then you can see Pierce County uses unemployment rate, whereas Tacoma uses employment rate. And then Pierce County also uses median home value. For education, you can see that these ones are very similar. I think all of them are the same here, showing on education. For environment, you can see some differences. Both use diesel emissions, ozone concentration, and PM2.5 particulates, and then proximity to heavy roadways. But then you can see Tacoma, like I mentioned earlier, has that urban tree canopy and then also that urban heat island effect captured as part of their indices. For livability, there's a bit of difference here between the two, where Pierce County uses actual personal and property crime data and Tacoma uses a crime risk assessment. And then after that, you can see that all of the indices are very similar with cost burden households, and then the insured or uninsured rates. And then you got a couple of differences with percent of low life expectancy and then fair or poor health. And both of them use the pedestrian and bicycle crashes data. So for tonight's purpose, what I really just wanted to do was introduce the concept to you and then also give you the opportunity between our next meeting to go see and explore the equity index maps that are included within the staff report, for us to have a future conversation about, what are going to be important indicators that we should be thinking about when we're exploring an equity map. So with that, any questions on equity maps?
Nope. I would like to study a little more myself.
Absolutely, yep. And I will say, for all of the Tacoma, Pierce County and Lakewood and Port of Seattle, if you go on to their equity maps, they actually have a methodology report that is available.
Yeah.
And it explains all of how the indices are created and what data sets they are using. So, back to your question about where's the data coming from, it gets very specific in here.
Okay. Yeah, I like to know how they figure out the English as a second language population, 2%, 3%, things like that. Yeah. Okay. So next on the agenda is commissioner reports. Commissioner.
So-
Right.
Okay, so the Juneteenth, uh, we've pretty much have it 100% planned. We've been meeting on a consistent basis. We met at the park last week and just did we call it military range walk of the area and really took a look at it. We made some adjustments. One of the major adjustments you'll see is we had planned to put the stage down on the low end by the playground facing upward. But because the water table is too high, still for this time of year, it's not safe for vehicles and the ground is too soft. So we flipped it, it's gonna be up on the high end and people will be down on the low end, looking
Okay.
up toward the shelters. So it's gonna be between, I don't know if that's A and B or the first two shelters where they cook and then it'll be there, served there. So it'll be between the cooking and the serving area. And then we'll have the other booths, you know, around that would come around. So we have it all set and planned. We have a number of vendors that will be there, information booths and all. And so we have, of course, the performance part of the speakers and then the performing part. We have some students, some young folks that'll be there. We'll have a young group that will post the colors for us and then return the colors at the end of the event. We have a River Ridge High School has a couple of groups that will be performing, you know, as well. So we're all set. We have the speakers in order. You know, I'll be speaking, representing the Commission on Equity on that day and just have a great time. We'll have, you know, the barber college will be there again, like normal.
Free haircuts.
Free haircuts. And so we're all set. All of the advertisements have been, you know, placed, social media, on the website, the city's website. There's just so many areas. I think a video, Lester did a video. It's just so many ways the word has been out. And it's been popping up on my Facebook a lot.
Are we
As
having
people
the-
share, yeah.
Are we having booth like? Okay.
So the city is gonna have a booth where we can answer questions and, you know, we can collect data, but as far as the commissioners, please just enjoy the event.
Yeah,
Great.
there'll be.
And just some information on the commission in the city's booth.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay.
Yes. So we're all set. It's just gets easier to plan each year as, you know, we have this experience now and the partnership is very strong with the Fred U. Harris Lodge and the city. So that's just, and they've just really taken charge. Fred U. Harris, they're so excited about the other things they can do to enhance it, to make it better. And so it's, their attitude is just so different than it was 2 years ago. They are so positive and so out front and being creative as
Yeah.
they go forward and improve the event. So I'm proud of them for their efforts and
Yeah,
what
people
they're
just
doing.
appreciate it so much and they come and go and tell them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen, yeah.
And in talking to Lester, who's chairing the whole thing, he said they have about 20 exhibitors, about
Mhm.
20 tents. They only had about three
We started with 3 the first year.
the first year. Last year was about 7.
7 or 8.
This year it's up around 20.
Wow.
And they are referred to, I'm suggesting you refer to them as exhibitors versus vendors.
Right.
It's nothing to be sold. It's
Right.
information and education. So exhibitors,
And that's
But
the one
about
thing that
20 of
sets us apart from the other Juneteenths. You know,
But
we
I'm
have
letting you know.
exhibitors and those who were showing their wares and sharing information,
selling stuff.
right, versus selling.
Yeah.
Right. Mhm.
Sounds great.
Wow, that's.
So we're expecting
fantastic.
between 1,600 and 2,000. So,
we know how many racks of ribs at this point are
They-
maybe barbecued?
Aces.
They assured me that they are going to increase it so they won't run out. So.
I'm looking forward to it.
that's-
One question, Cliff. In your planning and talking about things, have you built into it a security plan again this year?
Well, it's gonna be the same as before, where there will be a presence,
Okay.
but it won't be an active presence where they're
I
walking
know.
around it. But
Right,
they'll just kind of be there observing those types of things, and they'll do a sweep of the park early on.
good.
And then it's just, and of course, the chief and others, they spend time there, and the police department, they have a booth, they're on the list for a booth for the police department. They had them there last year, so they had several there that rotated throughout the day. And then they have the volunteers of those seniors like me that ride around with
Golf
this
carts
nice
and-
golf cart and stuff, so it'll be a passive
Yes,
security
yes,
plan,
yeah.
just ask.
It was very well done last year.
Mhm.
And I asked a question about security because things are popping up around this community.
Mhm.
This whole atmosphere in the last year, the people feel as though they have license to be mean and hateful. You know, and one of the things I was gonna mention, if you finish with that, it'll kind of segue right into it. We got the invitation from the Walk with Aaron
Yes.
on the 8th of June. Ugly racial incident, just ugly. Yeah, just out walking and there's a white jacked up pickup truck that rides around. Sometimes they've got the Trump and American big flag sailing off the back. But in this instance, in case you hadn't heard about it, on a Saturday morning, about 10 people just out walking. One guy driving the truck, another guy hanging out the window, you know, just blasting the N-word. Just blasting the N-word. Goes down, turn around, come back and do it again. And just this past week, as some walkers were doing it, there's the KKK rule sign, scratched all in the sidewalk with chalk and the swastika sign. And it had rained that morning, so it had to have been put there that morning after the rain, because the rain would have washed it away had it been, you know, so it's a lot of hatred being manifested, and I'd hate to think of 2,000 people assembled at one place from 11:30 to 4 o'clock, and for the mentality that's out there now, we've got to think, you know, proactively. We've got to really make sure. But around here in Thurston County, there's a feeling that, you know, we can do these things and act this way, and there are no consequences for it, unfortunately. But it's getting uglier, and with the action today of the of the court and the Trump trial, you know, everybody gonna be waiting to see what the reaction's gonna be by people.
Next few days. so we're
And,
gonna
you
be-
know, this is a predominantly Black gathering, predominantly. And so we've gotta be, you know,
Yeah,
wired all the time,
that's a great,
unfortunately,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's definitely true, especially thinking back about last year, how we were just, I don't want to say coaxing, there's got to be a better word than that, but we were inviting people that were just there at the baseball game and saying, come on in. Oh, is this for us? Yes, anybody can be there. I know for a fact, because I live around the area, I had put it out in our neighborhood Facebook page just to bring more awareness to it. And I for sure didn't want people to think that just because it was a Juneteenth event or something that's perceived as for people of color only, that was the only that was the only people that were invited. So, you know, we definitely need to, not that we need to, but I guess it is, we need to just kind of show that, hey, anybody can be here at it, as long as, you know, you're there for the right purpose, a good purpose, have good meaning and good intention. But yeah, that safety concern would definitely be um something to be on high alert about.
I saw the invitation came to the commission. Was the commission being invited to be a part of this walk? They're trying to get 100 people to say this community is united, this community isn't gonna stand for that kind of treatment of people. You know, that kind of thing. So with the invitation coming to, I know I'm gonna be there as a person, personally. As much as my gimpy leg will let me walk. I'm getting my knee replaced in July, so that's gonna be fixed. But I plan to be there and to show support, that because that's Tumwater and it's happening out there does not mean, you know, stuff isn't happening here in Lacey too, Olympia, the rest of the county. So I plan to be there, personally representing me. And I know we've got church people gonna be there, and we've got a bunch of League of Women Voters there because they were part of the walk and were subjected. There was 10 of them. Several of them were League of Women Voters walking that morning, and they were, you know. So it's not a good time. It's not a good time.
And the one final thing, Shannon and the city was able to get the parking lot completed before June.
Oh, it's beautiful. I've been riding by it. It's
So,
beautiful.
There's a lot more parking space there, so it'll be.
It's just
really nice.
beautiful.
Mhm.
I haven't been in it,
Public
but
Works
I've
team, did a great job on that.
Well, you weren't out there painting stripes?
I
or
love
anything?
it.
We gave Jenny a lot of credit, say, you got it done, so. Okay.
Okay, can I, also the same day, June 15, we also have a Korean War commemoration ceremony happening at Capitol, Olympia Capitol campus. So it's from 11 to 1. So you are welcome to stop by. But right after that event, I'm coming to Juneteenth. Great. Alrighty. We got director report.
Yeah, so I've got one item listed here and then a couple of items I just wanted to briefly touch base with you. And so the first item is future community forums. So we held our All Abilities Forum on May 20th. And we will get you all of the feedback as part of our next Commission on Equity meeting, just given the tight turnaround. We didn't have an opportunity to do that yet, but we want to get you that feedback. For the next two community forums, and we want to hold two more this year. Got a couple of thoughts and ideas, and I wanted to see if this group would be supportive of that and if I have some potential volunteers from commissioners to help organize it. For the last two events, I was thinking that, it worked out really well to have representatives from other jurisdictions to talk a little bit about what they were doing. So we had our representatives from, Inner City Transit, Department of Vocational Services, or DSHS. We had North Thurston Public Schools, et cetera. And I thought that was really helpful to have them. And so I was thinking for the next two forums, if we reach out to organizations to have a jointly hosted forum, very similar to our first equity forum that we had that was jointly hosted with New Life Baptist Church. And so my thoughts would be to start planning a Hispanic and Latina forum. Again, given, we have very low representation right now on our advisory boards broadly. And so reaching out to a couple of nonprofit organizations and seeing if they might be interested in us coming maybe to their facilities and hosting it, with them. And then the second one being a Asian and Pacific Islander forum and working with some local nonprofits on having a joint forum as well. So curious for any commissioner feedbacks, or if any commissioners may be interested in helping plan these next forums if you're moving forward with them.
So we kind of had Hispanic representation and also Asian when we did our immigrant, because that was kind of our commonality that we shared.
And I think you're absolutely correct. However, not all individuals who are Hispanic or Latino or Asian and Pacific Islander are immigrants. And so making sure that we capture the community broadly and making it welcoming of everyone.
Well, they're part of our growing population as well. And, you know, unique communities with unique challenges, concerns, and issues. And if we're gonna have, you know, that umbrella and talk about community input, you know, then we need to provide a forum or mechanism whereby they can give it, if there is any to provide. So you're talking about sometime in 2024?
Yeah, so I think, you know, just kind of being realistic with our time line right now, probably the next one being in August and then the last one being in October would be where we'd be aiming for.
Yeah. I mean, I'll help obviously, but I am fully booked. Kind of really busy right now. I got several other events that are happening in August. In October, I may be even out of state. So, but of course, I'll help wherever I can.
Okay, great.
So we'd be looking at the Hispanic one first, right?
You know, what I would like to do moving forward is just, you know, reach out to a couple of organizations and see if they're interested.
Right.
And then we can talk what potential timelines might work best for those groups, and then we can determine which one potentially comes first based off of those conversations.
Okay.
Maybe that in October, well, I'll hopefully have been slowing down myself at that time, but you might want to also take into consideration what things are coming up that during those times that would have maybe the most gatherings. Like you got the Dia de los Muertos in October. So, you know, if they've already got something planned, maybe we can partner in on something that maybe they already have planned or something that is an annual event. That way you can get a lot more visibility and awareness as well for the Hispanic community.
It's a great idea. Thank you, Commissioner Hart.
To Commissioner Hart's point, September, the middle of September to the middle of October is Hispanic Heritage Month, so that kind of all falls right in that same kind of window.
Yeah.
Great points. And, you know, I think again, you know, reaching out to the organizations and seeing if they want to jointly hold something and if they're available at that time would be one of the first steps we want to take. So I appreciate that.
And then jumping on to, I also saw the a show cultural flyer. I think that was also on when the Walk with Erin flyer came out. Maybe we can partner with Prashida and her area, since she's already got like the I know she does pop-ups monthly. I think she takes a break sometime in the summer, but she's already got the facility. She's got some of the clientele, and that may tie into the cultural. Now she is in Tumwater, so yeah, but I mean she's already got a growing community. And you can also tie in some of the buy one, get one meals, which is something else that she does, which could also tie in some of the houseless, homeless, you know, population that we may not get, because how are they getting their information out there? But I mean, if she's got something like the buy one, get one meals where people can just come in and do that, or her vendor event that she does as well, that might be another suggestion too.
Thank you, Commissioner Hart. We'll look in to Osho and reach out.
Okay.
I have a couple of other items that weren't included here that I just want to go over briefly, and it's all about really our next Commission on Equity meeting, which is on June 24th. First thing I just wanted to highlight is that Dr. Antonio Sandifer will be coming back to give an update on North Thurston Public School equity initiatives on that date. We'll also be talking about public comment and if the council moves forward with adopting any public comment policies that would be impacting the Commission on Equity. And so we did do that presentation about a month ago to the City Council, and we got some good feedback, and we took the recommendations to the considerations that you all brought up when we reviewed it last. And so we are looking to go back in front of council in the next couple of weeks and get some direction on whether they want to move forward with a new policy for public comment.
So I have a question. Is it possible to ask the North Thurston School District Board Chair to accompany Dr. Sandiford to this meeting? Or someone from the board?
Commissioner, I will get back to you on that one and we can see what could be some possibilities.
Okay. She represents the school district, but then there's the board. We don't get to, talk to them separately like we haven't had a one-on-one with the board or members of the board, but we have with Dr. Sandiford represent the school district.
Sure.
If they have questions, and philosophies and that we want to hear from the board and have an exchange. That joint meeting we had with the board, it was just people making presentations. It wasn't
No doubt.
back and forth, right?
Well, so I guess just a couple of things. So the Lacey City Council just met jointly with the North Thurston Public School Board a couple of weeks ago. And so in that one, you have, your elected body meeting, your elected body.
Yeah, I think we attended that last year. Yeah, probably that same meeting that we attended.
You were there, yep, correct, last year. And so we had a similar meeting to that where we had items from both the city and the North Thurston Public Schools and provided, presentations to. But again, it was elected body to elected body. I think, just recognizing that the Commission on Equity is an appointed body to the Lacey City Council and the school board is an elected body.
Yeah, we're just seeking access to, to the school district representative and to the board. If that's not possible, I understand, but it doesn't hurt that we keep trying to want to develop that relationship, the Commission on Equity with the school district representative, with the board representative. That's a goal that I have personally, that we can establish that relationship. And if there are some barriers we have to overcome, let's talk about them, if it's possible or if it's not possible. But I think that should be continue to be a pursuit of ours. It's just high level when, they meet, they talk. That's high level. We're kind of working body. So we want to bring it down a little so we can ask them tough questions and get some specifics and things like we did with the chief there. We asked him specific questions, and he gives us answers. I know the school district is different. They're not City of Lacey, but is it possible to have the type of relationship we have with the chief that we have with the school district?
And Commissioner Brown, I hear you. And again, just recognizing that obviously the chief is a city employee of City of Lacey, and we are going to be having, Dr. Sandifer, who is a school employee for
Right.
North Thurston Public Schools. We can do some follow-up on the request and see what comes of it.
Yeah, I just think if we just keep dangling out there that we want to get to know you guys, we want a relationship. Is it possible? Can we get a close relationship with the school district? And let them say, no. There's a fine line, or whatever. But I think pursuing that strong relationship would be helpful.
Along those same lines, I think it's important that we send that message that while we're working very hard as a commission on equity for a livable city, we can't have that desired livable city if we don't have an equitable school system. And, for them to see the connecting line between that dot and this dot. So we don't have to hear our young people talk about the inequities they feel they're experiencing, but we can, realizing we're not an elected body, and it's not apples and apples, it's an apple and an orange here. But an equitable school system is so critical to an equitable community. And I think there's some common discussions we could have without them feeling, some way
Yeah, with the new
But I agree
superintendent,
with-
what's the superintendent's philosophy? What's gonna be his
Yeah, I agree
approach?
with
What
Cliff.
about,
All we can do
what
is,
kind of relationship does he foresee with the city of Lacey, with the Commission on Equity? And, I think those are things we need to put out there and let them decide what kind of relationship do they see that we should have, that they should have with us.
I totally concur with that. And with us doing the work that we're doing, and we're trying to fix it within the system of government while people are already grown and having to change outlook, why aren't we starting with the younger and getting things enforced as youth, and so that when they come out and come to work for the city of Lacey or come to work someplace, they can already see. I think it needs to definitely start at a younger level, starting to think about some of those things, or I mean, do they even have some type of an equity board as well? Or are they even thinking about it? And then we have the youth council as well. I don't see why we shouldn't work a little bit closer with the school board.
So Commissioner Hart, we can certainly ask Dr. Sandifer some of the questions on, some of the equity initiatives that North Thurston Public Schools is doing at the June 24th meeting. I've heard you all, and I will follow up on that.
Mhm.
The last item I have is just, again, we are gonna have our new equity and inclusion program manager starting next Monday. So they will hopefully be also at our next June 24th meeting, where they'll be a part of this conversation.
what is that person's name?
Veronica Hand,
Okay.
What's the last name?
Hand.
H-A-N-D?
H-A-N-D.
Like it sound,
Yep.
okay.
With that, Vice Chair, I am done with the director's report, and looks like we have Commissioner Hedgewood here who may be able to do the inspirational item.
Yep, that's what I was gonna say.
John?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Worth noting, I've actually been on the meeting the whole time. I was in as a phone attendant because I couldn't get the app to work on my phone. And I was like pushing every button on the planet to try and get it to raise a hand. No joy, but that's okay. We're here now. All right, so I've got a excerpt from a poem called The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman, who is the first youth poet laureate. And she read this poem at the inauguration of President Biden. Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might, and might with right, then love becomes our legacy, and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover, and every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people diverse and beautiful will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Great. Yeah, lovely.
Great. Love that.
That brings, who will do next? Is there any volunteer for the next meeting?
Could I also volunteer for next month?
Right. super volunteers.
Did John volunteer? Oh,
Yes.
great, good.
Next month will be June month, so I will love to do one during Pride Month.
That's fantastic. So look forward to it. All right, there's no other business. I adjourn the Commission on Equity meeting at 7:44 PM.
Good job.
Yeah, good job.
We're not early
Good
today.
job, guys. See you guys
Yeah,
next
thank
month.
you.